Hi everyone, I'm Katherine Keegan. I think Jason gave me a little bit of a promotion, but I'm going to take it here on stage. I'm the director for the Office of the Future of Work, and I get to be here today to moderate a panel with some amazing leaders in business and government to talk about how we bring more of this sidelined talent into the game. I don't have many sports metaphors for you, but I'm going to try to not make a fool of myself and put them in there. So just as a quick overview of the Office of the Future of Work, we've existed for about 5 years. The office was created through an executive order from Governor Polis in 2019, and it was created to do a couple of things. One, to raise awareness about what the future of work looks like, and then to think about policies and programs that would prepare Coloradans for the future of work, to think about how we recognize the vast amount of change going on in our society and prepare our businesses, our communities for success with that changing nature of work. So I'm really delighted to be here to talk with you all about this. It's something I'm very passionate about. I have a background in immigrant services, adult education, and social work, and so this is my bread and butter, and I've already learned a lot from my fellow panelists just in preparing for this. So I'm gonna just get right to it so we can get on schedule, and I'm gonna introduce our panelists. We have 2 business members and then 1 member from the Office of Economic Development and International Trade. There's a bit of a change from your program, so unfortunately Dr. Janine Davidson was not able to join us, but I'm delighted to have Eve Lieberman join us from OEdit. And so, as I introduce them, they can make their way to the stage and join me here. They've removed the jerseys, so we can't steal them. Okay, first, Eve Lieberman. Eve was appointed Executive Director of the Colorado Office of Economic Development and International Trade by the Governor in January 2023. She leads efforts to create a positive business climate, fostering dynamic economic development and sustainable job growth. Under her leadership, OEdit advances Colorado's economy through financial and technical programs, striving to empower all to thrive within the state's economy. With a vision for a future of improved quality life, economic mobility, and environmental stewardship, Eve spearheads initiatives to support various industries and regions, ensuring Colorado's continued prosperity. So we can welcome Eve up to the stage. All right, next we have Dr. Sarah Hiza. She is Vice President and General Manager of Strategic and Missile Defense Systems at Lockheed Martin Space. We're very safe here with her on the panel. She brings 20 years of defense industry experience, particularly in areas of strategic deterrence and missile defense. Known for her extreme ownership and mission focus, as well as her talent for cultivating highly effective teams and mentoring, she's excited to share with us how Lockheed is leaning in to be co-creators of talent to meet the workforce needs of the space industry. And last but not least, we have Annette Quintana. She is co-founder of Istonish, and she brings over 30 years of business experience driving the evolution of new technological service solutions. Recognized as an Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year and a Technology CEO of the Year, her leadership has propelled Istonish into an international business. Annette's focus on talent development has been instrumental in growing her business and fostering a culture of innovation and success. So at the Office of the Future of Work, we oversee our state apprenticeship agency, and we believe apprenticeships are the future of work. We also work to close the digital divide because we know technology is changing the skills that are needed to do work. And so you'll hear me reflect on those as I ask some of these questions. But despite our love for apprenticeship, we know it's not the only way to bring sidelined talent into the game. And what we want to start with is just talking about the real challenges and the different types of talent that have remained untapped in our economy. Every year, the Colorado Workforce Development Council, shout out to the council who's here, they publish the Colorado Talent Pipeline Report, which gives us a picture of the supply and demand side of our economy. And we see real strength in our economy, but we also see a lot of segments of our population that have not been able to find success. So with that, turning to my panel, we wanted to understand and have you all bring a voice to some of the sidelined talent that is not engaging in the workforce And if you could tell us a little bit about who they are, what are some of the unique challenges they face, and how you think you can address their challenges. You can start with you, Eve.
Great. Thanks so much, Katherine. It's great to be here with you all today. We at Colorado's Office of Economic Development and International Trade work to advance our economy for all, and that is something we take very seriously. We know that we have a high net in migration into Colorado. A lot of that population has 50% of those have a bachelor's degree or plus, but the homegrown talent that we have here has in 2019, about 33 or 34%. With a bachelor's degree or above. So what we're focused on at the Office of Economic Development, and just largely overall the Polis administration, is doubling down on that homegrown talent, which oftentimes doesn't have the resources or skills to be successful. And that involves apprenticeships, it involves upskilling your own workers. And so, largely the Polis administration has made $1 billion investment in workforce talent development initiatives focused on in-demand jobs, because what we're talking about is not just investing in our talent in careers that may not have mobility. It's for actually the jobs that we're trying to connect employers with, the jobs that we need for the future that have a pathway to a quality job, a good paying job. So that's really critical to the Polis administration overall. It's really critical to the Office of Economic Development and International Trade. And two things I just want to recognize in general is that the legislature just passed a couple things that I think are going to be really life-changing. For many workers, it's the Colorado Promise Act, which is a refundable tax credit for those families making under $90,000 to go to college for 2 years. And then also the school finance formula. More funding, we can talk about later, but just general, more funding to underserved districts, more funding to rural and small districts, and those overall are going to be life-changing for decades to come. And I'm happy to talk about some of the programs that we operate at OEDIT. Many of our recipients are here, and you guys are doing just amazing work. We're so proud to be part of helping to scale and innovate these programs that provide a pathway for so many underserved learners across Colorado.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Eve. Yeah. Annette, what do you have to add?
Hi there. That works?
Yeah.
Okay, hey, thank you, and it's really a pleasure to be here. So I run a technology services company, and my lens on this workforce thing is through primarily the perspective of the tech industry, which, by the way, is an important one here in Colorado. Roughly about 9% of the total workers, depending on the study, 18% of the Colorado economy, and by the way, a really strategically important economic sector here. Now, what I'll say is that labor shortages have never been, they've always been a feature of the tech industry. For the last, 3 decades, it's always been a common factor. And so leaning into alternative sources of where you can get talent has always been an important part of it, including offshore, even though that's kind of not what we're here to solve, but immigrant labor. Highly skilled immigrant workers from largely Asia. And I would see that the industry will continue to work on that, and for folks here at the Colorado Business Roundtable and your lobbying and advocating in Washington, D.C., it's broken too. I mean, right now, the time frame to be able to get somebody who's working to get a green card and sponsored by a technology company, it's like 15 years. It's crazy. It's really, really long. So this is an area that's really broken too. But what I'd like to speak to is like our own company's way of doing it. So we have entry-level positions in tech, whether that's a help desk or some kind of an entry-level technician, and we hire people to do that work. And largely, we work to make sure that they develop the skills for doing that work, and that's one of the ways that we try to move the needle. And that's kind of risky for us. We're not a huge employer, but because there's only so many jobs that they can grow into in my business. We're not a huge global company, and so we can make those investments, and then they end up for better jobs, they're talented, moving on to other companies. And so that's something that we always try to balance. But what I would say is that there is also, in the tech sector, this has always been part of the push and pull of, are these boot camps and other programs actually sufficient for the kind of folks that we really need to hire? And there's a debate in the tech sector about whether straight up four-year college degrees are still really much more important. And so I would just encourage those higher education representatives that are here to continue to try to find ways that make education affordable and accessible, in particular to the underserved communities, because those degrees still matter a lot. And so if that can be some kind of a focus, that would, I don't know, it's just a request.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, well, thank you. When you hear the name Lockheed Martin Space, you probably think of astronauts or engineers. Yes, we are fortunate to work with those, and we do have many engineers, four-year degrees, masters, PhDs. That being said, there's a large portion of our workforce that is not needed, that does not need the four-year degree, and that's what I wanted to emphasize here with this question. There's really two that come to mind for me. The first is something called an engineering aid, and that very much correlates well with folks that have two-year degrees or certificates or some limited engineering experience, and they work right alongside our engineering workforce, playing a critical role. The other is technicians, and the technical folks who are able to put together these very complex products that we build are critical to our ability to deliver on those products. And with that, some come to us with skill. Others we get through something we call the Advanced Manufacturing Technician Apprentice Program. And this has been very successful for us. So we take folks who do not have skills, do not have four-year degrees, do not have two-year degrees, they're post-high school, but they have an interest in entering the aerospace and defense field. We take we've had about 600 folks through this program over a 9-week period, and we teach them the skills that transfer directly to our products and to our operations. And I just have a few stats here. So of those 600 apprentices, we have had over about 430 graduate to date. We have a 97% conversion rate from graduates to full-time employees at Lockheed Martin, and 70% of those are here in Colorado. So we have found that to be a great bridge with folks who don't have the four-year degree, but yet still have a real interest in being in the aerospace and defense industry. So thank you.
Perfect, thank you. You each touched on things I want to dig in a little bit more on. So we have policy questions and how do we motivate employers. We also talked about immigrants, and I'll share a bit more about that. But I want to maybe start kind of where we ended with the idea of skills-based hiring practices. Governor Polis signed an executive order a couple years ago to promote skills-based hiring in state governments and in the private sector. And so I'm curious from each of you, what might skills-based hiring policies look like in the private sector? How do those play out? And what are some of the biggest challenges we may need to overcome as we're trying to adopt skills-based hiring and make skills the currency of the job market? Whoever wants to jump in.
Okay, I'll pass it to you in just a second. Yeah, I think I hit on it a few minutes ago. Technical curiosity is definitely something we find to be common among folks who enjoy working at Lockheed Martin and have a long career with us. So that's first. We're really looking for skills-based that also have that want to apply it in a technical field. The other thing I'll emphasize is the importance of being able to work on a team. So we work in teams every day, and that's just the format of the way we work, and maybe that's obvious, but sometimes I think making sure we have that expectation with folks that maybe they have worked, possibly if they have skills, more in a solo situation. And when you come to Lockheed Martin, we are working as a team every day, working through problem solving, et cetera. So kind of setting that mindset up first, and then also working in a very inclusive environment. That's also just a standard of who we are and what we expect of our employees and how we operate as teams. So while we appreciate the skills. There's kind of some intangibles there that are also really important for them to be able to transition into our workforce and be productive and effective and be a really critical contributing team member.
And is that something you bake into the onboarding, or it's part of what you're looking for in candidates? Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, for both. I mean, both. So on onboarding, we are very clear about our expectations, working together as a team. But I think maybe as important, maybe more importantly, it's the expectations we set on our leaders and managers, so that day one, they are experiencing that with their management or leadership team around how we operate as a team, how we treat each other with respect, regardless of background or education, whatever you're bringing to the table. We respect that and welcome that, and want every person to feel included and a part of that team.
Thank you.
Great. I'll speak to it again through the technology lens. So we interpret skills-based education heavily in the tech center through independent, vendor-based qualifications. So the tech sector in general tends to be one of those environments where if you get an entry-level job, you're smart, you're hardworking, you begin to demonstrate what you know, you can move around a lot. And once you're in, there's a lot of credibility that's given to that. The thing about how to just establish objective credentials is to recognize that an engineering manager who's passed and maintains certifications through Microsoft or Amazon or Cisco network and security certifications that are vendor-based, when they see those on an objective, on somebody's background or credentials, they know what it means in terms of what they need to know. And so there's a tendency to rely more on those types of credentials as an objective way to be able to say, yes, I trust those. And so I'm not sure what all of the different boot camp programs might provide, but leaning into some of those industry objective criteria, I think is important.
Anything you want to add, Eve?
Well, I really want to give you credit, Katherine, for the skills-based hiring EO. I think we should all give a round of applause for Katherine. Honestly, your leadership at CDLE in this regard has been enormous. We're so fortunate to have you working on this policy so that the state is a model employer when we could not do that without you. I think 80% of the jobs right now in Colorado state government do not require they're all skills-based. So that's huge, that's enormous. Obviously there are some degrees that can't, there's some professions that can't, like, attorneys or et cetera, but I think that to get us to this point is enormous. So I want to say thank you. Just one thing from an employer perspective, as this is a public sector obviously, but we have 120 employees, and we are really doubling down on employee engagement and transparency in our philosophy. And so one thing that we've created is actually a matrix where you can find yourself, you can see your work experience, your skill level, and you can see here's my potential for growth and my potential for professional development. And that's we've gotten a lot of really positive response from employees where they can see, yes, I may have a bachelor degree and some experience, and I don't need to have that higher level, or maybe I don't have a bachelor's degree, but I've had 11 years of experience, and here's where I am on the matrix, and I can still get that progression, that growth in my own career.
That's wonderful. Yeah, thanks. I think that speaks to just the need and the value of skills-based hiring to create those growth models, because when people can see how they can attain those skills and what they can build on and the pathways that opens up for them, it's incredibly powerful. And that is something I wanted to ask about, if anyone has anything to add around how do we make sure those skills-based practices don't leave people at the entry level, but that you're building on those. And Annette, you talked a little bit about this, about adding new credentials, and that's a main way people remain competitive and move up. Are there other things that we need to think about as employers to help people chart their pathway in the economy?
Yeah, we have a phrase at Lockheed Martin, which is to attract, retain, and elevate. So yes, we want to attract, yes, we want to retain, but we also want to help elevate them in their careers. And there are two primary ways I will point out here. The first is through mentorship. immediately when folks come on board, we try to pair them up with folks that have been around that can not only show them where the restroom is, but also how the systems work and things like that. But then further along in their career, making sure that folks have an opportunity to have mentors, either folks that are in positions that they aspire to be in, or maybe there's a skill that they're trying to develop. And we find that to be very important part of that retention. As far as elevating, we have a tuition assistance program. So as folks maybe get more experience, they want to advance their career, maybe go back and get a 2-year degree, credentials, or maybe even their bachelor's. We have that tuition assistance program to encourage that and to facilitate them continuing in their advancement.
I'm just going to throw out another idea here, and my company profile is Native American and Hispanic owned business, and so I connect with some different groups that are trying to move the needle in terms of economic development in this economic sector. And the Stanford Graduate School of Business has done some research on Latino-owned businesses and the fact that over the last 10 years, their economic growth has outpaced every other segment of the economy. I'm not sure if you know that, but that's measured in terms of businesses started, revenue growth, payroll growth, employee growth, by far more than any other sector. I'm raising the point here because minority companies in general tend to employ more minority people in their businesses. So for the large companies and employers out there, one indirect way that you can move the needle is to simply work with minority suppliers with some appreciation or expectation that they will indirectly move the needle. So I just want to put that out there.
Yeah. Do you have anything to add?
The only thing I would add just generally in terms of the wraparound supports that we're seeing, the Opportunity Now grant that we've created is $85 million program developed. Many of you have heard of, many of you are recipients. Again, it helps employers co-create that talent with educational institutions. It focuses on in-demand jobs by region and helps create that pathway for learners. So what we've seen in terms of our recipients is 70% of the recipients of Opportunity Now grants have wraparound supports in their programs. And they're holistic, they're comprehensive, they're innovative. Obviously, the cross-purpose recipient, what an amazing program, because it's so holistic. It provides the opportunity that we were able to fund helps with an alumni program for 3 years to provide financial counseling, home ownership, financial literacy. And you have programs like Family Health West, which is a small hospital in Fruita. They're upskilling their own workers, and they're creating that pathway for their own employees. So they went from 80 job openings to now 10 job openings with between Career Advance and Opportunity Now. And so you really see when employers invest in their employees and provide those holistic supports, and they're different. They can be anything from addiction counseling to mental health, wellness, to the mentorship aspect, to the financial literacy aspect. They are comprehensive, they produce outcomes, and we are trying to scale those innovative wraparound supports to help all learners.
Thank you. All right, I'm gonna look at my notes because I wanna get these statistics right as we transition to talk about one segment of our population, which is the immigrant workforce and new Americans here in Colorado. So 1 in 8 of all workers in Colorado are immigrants. 1 in 6 business owners in the Denver metro area is an immigrant. The Migration Policy Institute also estimates brain waste, quote unquote, is the skill underutilization among college-educated foreign-born workers aged 25 and older, and is upwards of 25,000 in the state alone. So we have a huge pool of talent that is being underutilized. And while there's, of course, many debates and dynamics to the politics around immigration, the reality is that we have talent that can be leveraged here in Colorado. This is a big part of what the Office of New Americans does. Shout out to them, who is also here. And they actually released the Global Talent Task Force report that has recommendations for how the state can better leverage this new American talent and make it easier for people to apply their skills in Colorado. So, turning to our panel, can you share what ways Colorado employers can harness the skills of Colorado's immigrant population to ensure that they are not left on the sidelines? And yeah, Annette.
take a stab at this. Clearly, the immigration system at a federal level needs fixed. It's really all clogged up. And even for strategic interests that we have, economic interests that we have, it's just not working that well in terms of the ability to get even really highly skilled talent through that pipeline. So that's one thing that I think is really important. I'm just going to back to the point that I just made before about the Latino-owned businesses. In the Stanford report, 52% of all of those businesses are immigrant-owned or run, first, second, or third generation. So back to the question about economic stability, economic growth, how that flows through to employment, I think that's just another important strategy to keep in mind.
Beautiful. Anybody want to add anything else? It's okay if not. All right, because I also wanted to talk just about non-traditional students, and we touched on this a little bit about how Lockheed has pathways and resources to help non-traditional students access opportunity. Can you tell us a little bit more about those programs and some of the highlights and success stories of how you're bringing in new talent with non-traditional backgrounds?
Sure. So I hit on earlier the Advanced Manufacturing Technician Apprenticeship Program, which really does, again, focus on folks that do not have four-year degrees. And again, I think that's maybe counter to what people maybe assume when they think that folks work at Lockheed Martin. And we have found that to be just a great pathway to find folks who are interested. And it's a great time for those 9 weeks for us to teach and train them, and then also for them to get insight into what their daily life is going to look like working at Lockheed Martin. So it really is to both of our benefits, so we can set expectations on both sides. The other area I'll mention is veterans. That's a really important area for us. Maybe again, I'll share another statistic you may find surprising. 30% of our external hires are military veterans. And you could think, hey, that's a lot. But think about how they already have many of the skills we are looking for. They were just applying it on the other side, working for the government. And then they often have an affiliation already with our missions, some of the missions that we work on. So it's a natural bridge for us, for folks who are coming out of the military that may be looking for their second career, for us to make that connection. And then we find that to be very beneficial, both for ourselves as well for that military veteran community.
Awesome. Eve, do you have anything to add? Yeah.
I would just say we have about $100 million in talent development programs between Opportunity Now and then our Opportunity Next, which is a scholarship program that's reducing financial barriers for a lot of individuals that don't have a post-secondary plan. So we really are doubling down on that at OEDIT. But holistically, we are interested in incentivizing talent and employers to provide those services for workforce programs, connections to apprenticeships for underserved workers in general, and including, with our initiative, our public-private partnership that we created through Tech Hub Now. It created, an application with Elevate Quantum. Many of you are part of that amazing consortium. And a big component of that is creating a diverse and inclusive workforce where we're trying to ensure that Front Range Community College is a big player in that, providing kind of those skills to workers. But even Fort Lewis College is providing equipment and mobile labs and services to rural communities across Colorado that are focused on quantum degrees. We're partnering with K-12 institutions that are rural, underserved communities to get that exposure to quantum degrees so that they're getting that access to the jobs of the future. And so holistically, we're trying to seed those type of initiatives that incentivize the ecosystems to really double down on tapping into their underserved talent and provide those supports.
And I think that's a great segue, and I'm very curious from our other two panelists, what are some of those incentives or practices that you think need to be scaled or grown to help employers see the value of bringing this talent in?
I'm going to speak to this through the lens of our own company and through a broader perspective about the Colorado economic ecosystem. So Colorado has some very large employers, many of you who are present here, but by and large, it's a lot of smaller and mid-sized businesses that make up our economy here. And so the challenges of how they make these employment practices work are very different. I mean, they don't have a big HR team, and if they do, they're focused on like strategic kinds of hiring and other things like that. So there's that. What we've found to be especially helpful to us are internship programs that the Labor and Employment, Colorado Labor and Employment intermittently has funded, where there was one kind of on and off about 5 years ago where the Labor and Employment helped fund the internship. And it was in cooperation with the Technology Association, and I think we brought in at least half a dozen interns. And the way it worked is that about $10,000 of that internship cost was funded by the state, and we paid it first, and then that portion got reimbursed, and we ended up hiring 4 out of the 6 people that we brought in. So the point I want to make is it can be really expensive to bring less skilled individuals into your organization, but those kinds of programs can really move the needle for the long run.
That's great. And just to add on to that before I hand it off to you too, I think there's so many programs and opportunities that benefit from partnerships with your local workforce centers, and there's funding available to support some of that initial startup cost and to explore what types of work-based learning, whether that's apprenticeship or internships or other opportunities that can be leveraged with public dollars and private dollars to bring that together and make it more feasible. So definitely encourage that. But yeah, would love for you to add on.
Yeah, I'll take a little bit different path on this one, which is we work quite closely with many of the local universities. And that looks different depending on the need and the skill and the specific university. So some of it can be very much like setting up an intern pipeline, making sure that folks here locally know about Lockheed Martin and the opportunities. But then we also can be very specific. So we have like cybersecurity certifications that we will work with local universities, because again, that gets a skill ready for us to bring on that we need immediately. And there are other examples as well, but I just point out that making those partnerships, as you pointed out, it's I think beneficial for both academic as well as for us. And then another one that came to mind is if we can find certain types of talent in the universities and start working their clearances earlier, because many of our jobs require clearances. That's also another beneficial, because then the student, once they graduate, fully ready and prepared to come in and work from the get-go, instead of having to wait for their clearance to come in. And then of course that means we get to reap the benefit of their knowledge immediately.
That's wonderful. And I'm curious about how those partnerships began. Was that, engaging in your local communities where your headquarters were, or is it, what was the first step to build those partnerships?
Yeah, for Lockheed Martin, while there are some exceptions, we typically partner with local universities. Now, of course, we are all over, we're spread out over the country, but we typically partner with universities. Many of you in the room we have partnerships with and we're working with closely. And it's local, because we find that our retention is typically higher when we have folks that are local. Like sometimes, people will want to move around, but often if we can work more with local universities, we see a better retention.
Yeah, Annette, anything to add?
Oh, I would just add that including, I think, a lot of legislation's passing this session to incentivize employers to understand kind of the ROI, the value on creating apprenticeship programs. There's a $20 million tax credit.
15 million.
Okay,
Yeah.
got scaled down. A tax credit for employers to take part in apprenticeship. There's a tax credit for intermediaries to connect between employers, and then job skill programs. And then we also passed a continuation of the Opportunity Now grant program. The grant's going to be focused on construction, doubling down on our workforce shortages there, and in the federal investments that we have, and then also a tax credit that will be ongoing. And we've heard from so many employers, the incentive that you're creating is forcing us to create partnerships with employers, with educational institutions that did not exist before. And from phase 1 and phase 2, that's almost $80 million that we've dispersed to recipients. There's been over 300 educational partnerships created, over 300 employer partnerships created. And so it's really making a difference, making that connection to double down on creating opportunities for learners in in-demand jobs and good paying jobs.
Absolutely, yeah. Today is the last day of legislative session, as I'm sure everyone is aware. So lots of bills just crossed the finish line, and we're really excited about the workforce package that Governor Polis promoted and the advocacy that took place in order to really put the money behind these practices that we're really passionate about and believe can make this difference. So thank you for mentioning those.
So I could just add one
Yeah.
thing, and it's sort of a request to the state of Colorado on the workforce policies. They can be really complicated for employers to access.
What?
I know, go figure. And so somehow making that more navigatable
Yeah.
in some way or another would just really be helpful.
No, I think that is feedback we hear a lot. And yeah, Eve, if you want to add anything to that, because I know with more pilot programs, with more grant programs, that's all just things that people need to apply to. And that's where thinking about how we can leverage intermediaries, other organizations that have that connection in the community, the connection to employers to leverage those funds. But yes, I hear that loud and clear, and it's something that we take very seriously and are trying to improve every day. Anything else? Okay. And so just staying on the policy conversation, we talked about immigration policy at the federal level. There's also reauthorization of the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act at the federal level. So we know that all of this work happens as a combination of policy and practice. And so I'm curious about any other policies that you all are paying attention to, or policies that you think could make a difference for your businesses or for the industries that you all work in.
So certainly the workforce in action policy does support, and we work in collaboration with the AMTAP program that I just mentioned a few minutes ago. I won't keep saying it over. Hopefully you've got the acronym now and you'll give me that leniency. But the other one I would spike out that I kind of introduced in the former question that we continue to work with the government on is the clearance issue for us. So there's about, depending on it varies a little bit depending on the clearance, but it can take 12 to even 24 months, and that's months for an employee to get a clearance if they have not worked with us or with the government before. And as you can imagine, that's disappointing on both sides, right? Like, so that's disappointing for the employee who thinks they've been hired to do something, and yet we kind of have them doing other things while we wait for that clearance to go through, which is, again, completely kind of dependent on the government. And then on our side, we're eager to get that person skilled up, to be taking advantage of their knowledge and their know-how. So we're really trying to work with the government on how we can either expedite those clearances, have partnerships from internships so that we could get those expedited earlier, so that once those employees are on board, they can hit the ground running. And again, I think beneficial for both the employee as well as for the company.
Thank you. I'll just add on to this, and it's not so much around the federal clearances, but it's around business practices that can sometimes exclude individuals. So for example, we work with major corporations providing services and governments, and our contracts expressly don't allow us to hire someone if they've got any kind of legal issue on their record. And it's kind of it's an interesting question, because we've got primarily a remote workforce, and you go, really? Do you care if they had a DUI? They're not driving anywhere. I mean, does that really matter? But they become obstacles in accessing individuals that could be very good workers, and it's just, in a tight labor market, it's just one other way that it can be difficult. So really looking at some of those policies, I think, through a clear-eyed lens, does this make sense or not, it's just an important part of it.
All right, I'm going to pivot to a question around artificial intelligence and digitalization, because we know as we talk about skills and the changing nature of the labor market, that technology is playing a huge role within that. And it's changing the types of tools that employers use, the type of skills that people need from day one, and as their careers evolve. So how does the private sector prepare for these types of changes, and what should managers and employees both be doing to stay relevant with emerging technologies? And I think I'm going to start with you, Dr.
All right. Well, first of all, I think our new next generation expects this. So I mean, that would be one message I have for everyone here is, you know, telling an employee that they're going to have to use paper or microfiche is not going to go well. So that's just a tip from this seat. So we really have to be ready for the workforce. And for Lockheed Martin, we have we have dove in on the deep end of the pool. So we have committed over a multi-year effort, $6 billion, that's with a B, to digitize our entire workforce and our infrastructure that supports our workforce. And I say that because it's often, I think, people think about, oh, well, we're going to have AI with the products that we're building, maybe with satellites or something like that. While that's true, we will use digital tools and so forth to make our products better, more reliable. I think the thing that is more impactful in a way is that we're using it to run the entire business, and it's not just engineering, right? So it's the way we do HR, it's the way we do our finance. Everything is being digitized in a way that the entire corporation has, I'll call it a digital thread throughout. And that really is, like I said, a huge commitment that we've made, and because we believe that is not only the future, but also what our employees expect of us that's coming in. So a multi-year, $6 billion investment to fully digitize and find the right tools beyond just engineering on how to run the organization.
So I'm going to speak to this through the lens of like a business just sort of using it to create efficiencies. Of the presentations I've been involved in and what I'm sort of seeing and the way it evolves, I think it will have the potential to hugely disrupt entry-level positions. So whether that's customer service or whether that's IT support or whatever, I mean, eliminate actually a lot of those jobs that have become part of a strategy for workforce development. It's going to be hugely disrupted. And so I think it's going to challenge everybody to continue to move upscale in the knowledge economy and the way that AI is a part of it. So that's one thing. Second thing is for organizations using it, and this is probably something Lockheed has a really good eye on, it's that most of the time your data is pretty good, but when there's discrepancies or disconnects from customer data in the CRM system versus what's in accounting, applying that in your organization using AI will take and magnify, amplify those disconnects. It's why when we're using, for example, ChatGPT for information, you gotta remember it's like getting advice from your drunk friend. Seriously, it's like mostly right, but it's just a little off, and you just got to keep it in perspective. Your drunk friend, it's ChatGPT giving you advice, and it's mostly good, but keep it in perspective. So I'm just going to leave that.
Like that explains a lot of the results I've gotten, yeah. Wonderful. Okay, well, I'm going to wrap us up with one last question. You know, we've talked a lot about the challenges. We've shared some promising practices and policies that are being enacted. I'm curious from each of you to wrap us up, what gives you hope about our state's ability to tap into sideline talent? Eve, do you want to start?
Sure. I think whenever I hear of individuals going to conferences, speaking at workforce talent initiatives in DC or California, I think people come back with a sense that we are innovating, we are doing things and we are doing things that are going to be hopefully sustainable and scaling. We are focused on outcomes. We are focused on, for opportunity now, completion, job credential attainment, wage gains, and how do we scale and sustain those over time, really looking at that opportunity. So, and I think we have these wraparound supports that exist, that all of government, I think employers are doing it in the right way. We have really model employers that are practicing what they preach. And then also from the state side, we're doubling down on full-day kindergarten, universal preschool. We are helping to catalyze investment from the federal government for employers to provide childcare for their workforce. We're creating incentives for employers to hire different underserved populations. And so I think all of the above makes for a more diversified, stronger economy. And I'm excited about the potential ahead. I think Colorado's out innovating every other state in so many different ways, and that's what gives me hope.
What encourages me is that we've got this wonderful group of people here representing our largest employers that are connecting in with this issue through the lens of both the business imperative or value that solving this challenge presents to your businesses and to our state and our economy, but it's layered with a heart for why it's the right thing to do for all the people that are affected by it. And so somewhere between the business motivations and the right thing to do, I think helps propel us through to get through a lot of the obstacles.
I don't need to tell this audience what an amazing state Colorado is. And from my perspective, it's very exciting because the state it is, and then from the seat I sit in, the aerospace and defense industry is growing. And what I see is just opportunity galore. When you're in a great state and you have in my case, in a sector that's growing, that means there's just unlimited potential to be tapped. And then if I look at that next level, kind of what you were getting at, there's always this eagerness to partner in Colorado. And that partnership, when we reach across, whether it's the private, the public, or the academic levels, then I think we really start to harness even more opportunity and take us to the next level. So I'm happy and excited to be here.
Thank you. If we can give my panelists a round of applause, and thank you all for being here.